Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of your safety and your own personal safety, we ask that you keep a close watch on your carry-on and personal belongings.
Welcome to the AeroExploration podcast, where aviation's past, present, and future meet. We explore the stories that build aviation history, take you inside the industry today, and uncover the career paths and innovations keeping the industry in motion. We go behind the scenes, into the cockpit, and onto the ramp, meeting the people and discovering the places that define aviation. If it's part of the flying world, you'll find it here. This is AeroExploration.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the AeroExploration podcast. On this episode, we're going to chat a bit about some flight school options. I know that there's a lot of people who might think that there's this bad rap out there with these accelerated courses to go from zero to hero, but we're going to talk to one flight school owner today about what those programs are actually like, some of the misconceptions, and things that might be beneficial for you in this type of program. Before we start the episode, I want to thank those of you who have reached out to me by email in the last week or so. Had some really good questions raised to me, some people looking for some pointers or people to talk to in the industry. And I just want to say I really appreciate the trust that you all put in me to have those conversations and to hopefully point some of you in the right direction for your aviation career journeys. It really does mean a lot. This is one of those moments where I can take that short pause and realize that even though I really enjoy telling these stories and creating this podcast, that there is an impact beyond just me having fun creating these things. So thank you for reaching out. It is greatly appreciated. And I've said this before, but it is the rocket fuel that keeps me going as I put these episodes together. So a sincere thank you. Not much flying for me in the last week. Most of my free time has been dedicated to doing some online ground school for my CFI rating. Yes, the flying part is important. My work schedule has just been such that I haven't been able to get up in the air or take some time off to go up there. Or the times I do get an opportunity to take off, there's a conflict one way or the other, and it just doesn't work out. But at any rate, I'm still finding time in the evenings and when I'm between kids' activities to do that ground studying that is so important for this rating as well. So let me pose this question to my audience. When you've got that ever-important check ride set up, it doesn't matter what rating we're talking about here, what are some tips and tricks that you use to prepare yourself as you get ready for that check ride? Now, I'm not talking about day of. Let's say that you've got this thing set, and with the DP situation the way it is now, it might be a month or two or maybe even 3 before you can get to that examiner. So what kind of things are you doing to prepare yourself in that time frame? Or, for that matter, keep your skills and your knowledge fresh while you wait for that date. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say. You can send me a voice note on social media or email. My socials everywhere are at aero_exploration, and my email is jim@flyingmidwest.com. If you don't want to leave a voice note, you can certainly leave me an old-fashioned email, or you can leave a message on my social medias as well. And yes, I'm aware I just referred to email as old-fashioned. Anyway, I would love to hear from you, and if your comment is beneficial for the community, I'll be sure to share that on a future episode as well. All right, so on to our interview for this episode. I'm thrilled to be joined by Patrick Arnzen. He is the CEO of Thrust Flight. He is a flight instructor. He is an A&P. He is a former airline pilot. So he's got a lot of great experience he brings to the table, and we're going to talk a bit about the industry as it is today. Specifically, we're going to talk about A&P shortages and how his program has begun taking on more and more A&P training. We are also going to talk about accelerated flight training programs. Now, some of these programs can get a bad rap. He's going to uncover some of the mystery behind some of these programs, the pros, the cons, and we'll talk about if this is the right type of training for you. So let's dive right into this interview and have a chat with Patrick. Patrick, thanks so much for joining me. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to talk about our topic tonight as far as flight training and directions that's going in the industry. So welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
So how about to get us started, could you tell us a bit about your background in aviation and the path you took to get there?
Sure. I took what I would call a pretty windy path to get to where
Nothing
I'm
wrong
at.
with that.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of people that have similar stories to mine. So I started flight training in the mid '90s, which was kind of the last really big hurrah before the most recent massive airline pilot training. So I had finished my ratings right before September 11th happened.
Okay.
So, we had all these great big dreams, and, I was headed to the airlines, and it felt a lot like, 2022 did back then. And then, September 11th happened, and, that really put everything on a very big pause for me. So I instructed for a while, had a great time doing that, instructed for Eastern Kentucky University.
Okay.
And then founded my first flight school back in 2000 and late 2002, early 2003, and then did that up until about 2006. Um, so I had a little bit of a medical issue then, got that cleared up. I actually ran a nightclub for a while, so it was kind of a interesting departure
Okay.
from flying, and
I'll
certainly
bet.
not down the fairway for me. I like to go to bed at 10 o'clock, so
Yeah, that
um,
nightclub is not your thing then.
no, definitely wasn't. So it's quite an adjustment. I went to the airlines after that, and of course, then 2008 happened. I was furloughed twice at the airlines,
Jeez.
and that was back in the day when we were making $18,000 a year and living out of a suitcase, and I
Yeah.
was Kennedy based, so it was tough. I was actually furloughed for the second. Actually, no, I think that was my first time over the Thanksgiving weekend on my honeymoon. I
Oh
just
man.
got married, so to say I had a kind of a rocky path or a winding path was kind of an understatement. So after that, I opened a flight school for an international company. Just having the experience in the flight training space. I became a DPE in 2012. Got involved with the company that I now run in 2010. So the company was primarily a company that imported and assembled and then sold and managed a dealer network for an aircraft called the Piper Sport and the Sport Cruiser. So we imported about 500-ish of those airplanes, did the final assembly, avionics work, things like that. But what we did is we opened a flight school to market that aircraft, kind of the buy what you fly type of model. I mean,
Sure.
Cessna's done it, Piper's done it, things like that. So we were a dealer from 2010 until 2017, and an importer for this aircraft, and we're very successful at it. But we saw the writing on the wall that the light sport market was winding down,
Okay.
and certainly that the flight training market was starting to ramp up. So we decided to pivot. We were always in that flight training space, but we said, you know what, we're going to do this on purpose.
Okay.
And flight training was always something that I was always very passionate about. I certainly love sharing aviation with as many people as we can. So we said, okay, we're going to pivot. We're going to really just concentrate on making professional pilots, which is when we launched our Zero to Airline program back in 2017, and that's what we've been doing ever since. So it's certainly not what I would have thought I was going to do, but I'm so glad I ended up where I have, and having touched so many lives and worked with so many people and networked and met with, it's just such a neat community
Yeah.
that we're in as aviators. It's special. And I think anybody that's not in the industry or hasn't experienced the culture and, just the people that we surround ourselves with, it's different. It's different than anything I've ever done. And it's something I'm just so proud to be involved with.
Yeah, very cool. Let's talk a bit about your pivot that you made to you're going to create professional pilots.
Mhm.
And you're talking about like the zero to hero type programs. So is your program, is it kind of accelerated? Is it still at the student's pace, or how does your program work?
No, so we are an accelerated program, and for lack of better words, we're a pilot factory.
Okay.
And I know there's a lot of hate, might be a strong word, but hate for pilot factories that are out there. But one thing I like to say, we're a pilot factory that cares. I mean, culture comes first. We do everything on purpose. And I took a lot of how I've structured this program from my own experience as a flight instructor, and
Sure.
before that as a student. And back when I was training, I just kind of felt like I was just kind of feeling around in the dark. I didn't know what direction to go. I didn't really have very good mentorship. I didn't have anybody guiding me. I didn't know what the end looked like, right?
Oh, sure.
And I I knew I wanted to be a pilot. I knew I wanted to do something in aviation, but that was it. And it took me a very, very long time to figure out what the direction was. And I didn't want people to have to go through that. We've become a big flight school. We've got 4 locations, but I still fly with just about every single student that comes
Oh, wow.
comes through our program. It's just so nice talking to the students, hearing the good, hearing, any challenges they've had. And it's such a neat way for me, from somebody in my seat, to be able to communicate and talk to everybody that comes through the program, because we want the program to be better for the next person. We want it to
Yeah.
be, we don't want to get consistently worse, which I think is part of the problem a lot of people have with, a pilot factory, is the product generally goes downhill. And I think that's because you get so big and you lose connection with the students and you stop caring about the product. You start caring about money, right? This is a business, obviously. We have to make money, but at the end of the day, we want to make great pilots. We want to make people that we're really, really proud of. I don't want to leave a legacy of barely adequate pilots with pilot certificates. I want to leave a legacy of people that I'm confident when I get into the airliner that they're flying, that I'm confident that they're going to execute their mission carefully and they're going to have a great life because of it. So, that is my mission every single day when I get up. How can I make this better? How can I tweak this program to make the experience that much better and that much more enjoyable for the student? And how can I make the education better? It's so important to what we do every single day. And we've done the
Yeah.
same thing now with aircraft mechanics. So we've launched a very successful A&P program, airframe and power plant mechanic program. I'm also an airframe and power plant mechanic myself, as well as having an IA. So it's a whole other piece of the business that I think everybody knows that we need pilots, but I think we don't talk enough about mechanics. I mean, the need for mechanics out.
100%.
Yeah. It is a crisis, right? It's an absolute crisis, and the need for mechanics outweighs the pilots by 3 to 4 times, right?
Wow.
Mechanics don't get the recognition that they really deserve. I mean, it's hard work. It's very fulfilling work. I mean, I am my happiest when I'm working on aircraft. It's just, I don't know. It's certainly a passion of mine, and again, I love sharing that with people. And watching young men and young women change their lives. It's so special.
Yeah. I definitely want to get back to the A&P stuff. I want to go back to just the accelerated programs. You mentioned that, I mean, there's some people out there that have some hate for these accelerated programs, but what are some of those misconceptions that are out there about these accelerated programs?
I think it depends on what accelerated training program that you're looking at. And I'm sure that there've been plenty of people that have come out and had great experiences, but I think there's a fair amount of people that haven't, as well as other schools. It goes something like, here's a pile of books, go home, study. I think they've got a lot of smaller locations where, there's relatively inexperienced flight instructors that are essentially running those locations, and that guidance isn't there to help people get from A to B. And you really have to be a pretty exceptional student in a lot of those cases to be able to make it through those programs successfully. I think there are a lot of people that go through accelerated pilot training that they excel in either the flying side or the studying side, right? One of those sides is generally going to falter, not always, but sometimes, right? I want to be there to help those people when maybe they don't have the best study skills. Maybe learning is more difficult for them, or maybe they don't pick up the flying as quickly as some other folks. I want to make sure those people feel supported and that we can help them on their hardest days. And I think that's one thing in the industry that we don't talk enough about, is how emotional flight training really is. It is probably one of the hardest things that people do, is to go through a program like ours in a 10 to 12 month period of time and get all of these ratings.
Yeah.
It's a full-time job. And that's the way we couch it with everybody that comes into our program. This is a full-time job. You need to devote 100% of your time and energy to this program if you're going to get out of this in this time period and with all these ratings. And a lot of that is supporting people through that emotional journey. I don't know about you, but I have experienced some of my highest highs and my lowest lows during flight training, sometimes in the same day.
Oh, yeah.
It is so important to surround yourself with a community that understands that, right? And is
Oh,
is
yeah.
there to like celebrate your wins and lean on, and to lean on somebody else when you've got a really crummy day. I mean, failed check rides. I mean, this stuff is not fun, right? When somebody tells you, look, hey, you've got to work harder, that's not an easy pill for a lot of people to swallow, but it's a lot of times what they need to hear.
Yeah.
Um, And we try and hold people very, very accountable, while at the same time being sensitive um, to all the challenges that come along with this. And I think that, back to your original question, is why do people have a lot of hate for these big time flight schools? I think it's because unless you are the top 10 or 20%, you're not going to have a great experience, because you're not going to have that community around you. You're not going to have the staff that is really supporting, um, you know, these these basic human needs that
Excuse me.
that we all have.
It's almost like there's something in the fundamentals of instruction about basic human needs.
There is, and I tell you what, we spend a lot of time on the fundamentals. We are super proud of our CFI program. We spend 10 days on these psychological um, you know components that go along with flight instruction, because it is such a big deal.
Yeah.
And I think, when I was going through the fundamentals of instruction, you know 25 whatever years ago, I remember thinking, this is kind of nonsense. And then I'm just showing people how to fly. Like, I don't
Yeah.
need to be a therapist here, right? But I don't know about you, but I have had people tell me some of their deepest, darkest secrets in an airplane. And I have forged some of the deepest relationships in airplanes, because the amount of trust that a new pilot or a person puts in you, because you're literally keeping them alive, right? I mean, you are getting close to, sometimes crashing an airplane and saying, okay, this is how we don't crash an airplane, right? And I think, there's a lot of psychology that goes into that. And then we talk about all the challenges and all the other things, and how do we talk to people, and how do we change the message depending on who the person is, using different instructional styles if one doesn't fit. It is so deep and it's so impactful. And to me, it's just so interesting um, to to talk about that stuff. And how do I craft this message to to make it better, like to work for this individual. I'm probably one of the only crazy person, one of the only crazy people in the world that have made flight instruction like my entire life, right?
Yeah.
um and
Not
you
that you're
know
crazy.
maybe a little bit. So um but you know having done this, and I probably have, I don't know, 10, 12,000 hours of dual given. I still am learning every single day. And I think that is, again, what's so neat about this profession is you are always learning, you're always getting better. And you can always just eke a little bit more professionalism, a little bit more of the art of flying, right? How do I just make it just a little better every single day? And it's just so neat.
So let's talk a bit about like the industry today and the traditional pathways that we see people taking. I know that the big one that you see is these 4-year degree programs out of name the university. So, but I think that might be a misconception as well, that you have to go get one of these 4-year degrees to be successful in aviation. Is that your experience?
Oh, I don't think you need a 4-year degree to be successful at all. Aviation and a collegiate 4-year degree generally do not blend well together, right? There are so many variables in aviation, weather, scheduling, aircraft maintenance, right? I mean, as a flight school owner, we're a logistics company, right? Because they're
Yeah.
I feel like I'm UPS some days, because we're constantly moving things around and being flexible and things like that. And a traditional brick and mortar 4-year school is anything but flexible, right? They're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and it doesn't really work. And let's be honest, it does not take 4 years to learn how to be a pilot. So I would challenge anybody that is considering a traditional 4-year school. And then on top of that, then they're going to have to build flight time. And generally, people do that at the college program. And they're not going to fly 100 hours a month. They're not going to fly 120, 130 hours a month. They're going to fly 50 hours a month, because that's what the collegiate schedule allows for. So they're going to spend 4 years in that 4-year degree program, and then they're going to instruct for another 2 years, and then they're off to the airlines. I just don't think it's a good value for your money. And I think we're seeing this not just in aviation, but worldwide, that people are looking at the trades. And let's be honest, pilot is a trade. We're like a plumber or an electrician. It's a trade, and I think people are starting to realize that the trades are a great place to be, and that we don't necessarily need a 4-year degree. And I would say to those people that really want that 4-year degree, and there's a lot of people out there that want it, the best advice that I could give is get in, get your flight training done, get on at an airline or a corporate gig or whatever you want to do as quickly as you possibly can. Start building that seniority, start making money, and then go to any of these colleges, Embry-Riddle, Purdue, um, any of these aviation colleges, and you're going to walk in the door and they're going to award you around 50 credit hours just for your flight training experience. So you're going to walk in having half of your degree already complete. You're going to spend a lot less money, you're going to spend a lot less time, and you're also going to rack up a lot less debt as a result.
Sure. Do you see, with the market the way it is right now, is there any limitations that someone might have by going the route of not getting a 4-year degree? Or have you not experienced that with your students?
No, I've spoken with a lot of the airlines that we're affiliated with. Um, there is literally no difference between someone that has a 4-year degree and someone that does not. Now, that did not always that was not the case in years past.
Sure.
But I think that the attitude towards a 4-year degree has changed in a very, very big way.
So let's talk about, maybe I asked you this already. Have I asked you about just the challenges in the space that you see today? I think I walked around it a little bit, but I don't think I directly asked you.
Well, I think right now a lot of the challenges is this noise of there's no jobs out there, right? I think this noise is coming from people, from influencers on the internet that say, well, don't bother becoming a pilot because there's not going to be a job for you on the other end. And it's just not the case. We had record hiring in 2022. It's never happened before. Compounded by COVID, compounded by early retirements, compounded by the normal retirements that have been happening. And look, I've lived through so far 3 of these cycles of downturns in airlines. September 11th was a huge downturn, took years to recover. And then in 2008, I was at the airlines when that happened, and during COVID. And what I will say is, this is not a downturn. What we have right now has been a clogged pipeline. The need for pilots still remains, but you can only hire so many people and get them through this pipeline. And at once. So there's only so many simulators. There's only so many people that can train these folks. There's only so many check airmen that can do initial operating experience. And then when they do get into the airlines, they have to spend 1,000 hours in that right seat before they can upgrade to captain.
Yep.
So we have a captain problem right now, and that pipeline is clearing out. So I'm very close to someone that was a former executive at United Airlines, and he told me that United Airlines plans to hire around 2,400 pilots in 2025.
Okay.
That's a tremendous amount of pilots at one airline.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be an all-time record if that's true at United Airlines, and I think we're going to see the same from a lot of the other airlines. So I think if we look at the data, right? So if we're not talking about feelings, if we're not talking about what influencers are saying, and we're looking at things like the Boeing report that's forecasting all of these retirements that are coming, there is no possible way that we're going to be able to keep up with training enough pilots to fill all of these seats. So when we strictly look at the data, there's a huge need for these airline pilots, and I would encourage anybody that's either considering getting into flying, or anybody that's currently a flight instructor building time, or they're around their 1,500 hours and they say, well, I can't find a job. It's coming, and it's coming quickly. This is not a September 11th event. It's not a 2008 event. It has to stabilize after this massive hiring, and I think that's what we're seeing is a stabilization. I think 2026 is going to be a banner year for pilot hiring.
So do most of your students go the route of the airlines, or do you see them going into other parts of aviation, be it the 135 corporate flying or cargo or something like that?
It's a mixed bag, but I would say the vast majority of those people that come through our program are going to the airlines. And I think a lot of that is how we're positioned in the market.
Okay.
With with our different airline partnerships and things like that. I would say, there are certainly some that are going the corporate route, 135 route, and that sort of thing. But the vast majority is airline pilots.
So, how do the partnerships work with the airlines and your school?
It really varies. It's depending on the partnership itself. So my experience has been, with these airline pipeline programs, is they're almost a little bit reactionary, and I don't mean that in a bad way. But when they need pilots, they're out there every 2 weeks, and they're getting more aggressive with their advertising and their bonuses and things like that. When that pipeline clogs up, it's fewer and far between the visits and things like that. So it
Okay.
really just depends on what the current climate is, and I'm talking like month to month. So it's in a lot of ways very reactionary as to what they need to fill that part of the year.
Okay. So, from your students, what kind of backgrounds are you seeing them coming from? And are you noticing a trend, whether it be younger kids or people making career changes? Are you seeing any trends in the space right now with your students?
So we get a lot of young folks straight out of high school, or maybe that have done 1 year of college and say, you know what, this really isn't for me. But we also have a very big population of career changers. So
Okay.
we have folks in their 30s and 40s that have worked a full-time job in a career, finance career, insurance. I mean, you name it. A lot of EMTs, firefighters, folks like that, that have said, this doesn't fulfill me, and I think aviation is really where I want to be. And then we even have some folks in their 40s, that have had a full career, and want to spend the next 15 or 20 years of their life flying, and it's really a second career for them. So it really is a mixed bag. We also have a lot of flight attendants that
Okay.
have worked for regional and major airlines that have come to us, and they decided they want to be in the front of the airplane instead of the back of the
Yeah.
airplane. So that's been really a neat experience. So we have a very diverse group of folks. We have a huge female population, probably 20%,
That's
which is a
awesome.
huge number, and I'm so excited to see so many women joining the field. So I think um, statistically, about 8% of the pilot population is made up by females. So for whatever reason, we've attracted a lot of females to our program. We have a lot of female flight instructors and females in leadership. So it's, and we're not seeking out necessarily, yes, we want to go and hire females. It's been really neat that we've been able to find great people, and a lot of those have been women. So pretty neat statistic. And
Yeah.
it just kind of happened on accident.
Well, and if you can create an environment where they feel comfortable training and they feel like they belong part of that community, I think that's a big part of it too.
And I think that's where we've really succeeded. I think they appreciate that community that we built, and let's face it, it's nice to go and be in an atmosphere where you're with other people that you can align with. So it's pretty special.
Yeah, for sure. So, of the people within your program, do you see any patterns of people who are successful or thrive within the program? And like, what are those traits that someone might be able to bring to the table?
I think it all starts with a good attitude. Those people that come into the program with a good attitude, with good study skills, that have been accountable, and a lot of these folks that have had other jobs in the past, they're very successful in the program. But I will tell you, we've had people that have joined the program, and a lot of times they'll go to the orientation days, and I'll see these folks. I'll say, boy, this person's going to have a hard time here, just based on their comments, or just kind of their general attitude. And I'm rarely surprised, but I'll give you an example. I had a young man a couple years ago, that came into our program that had an attitude. I still remember, he showed up in sweat, like a pajama pants and flip flops, and I mean the pajama pants were red. I still remember it like it was yesterday.
That's like the teenager uniform right now. That's what I mean. I see all these high school, like my son's in high school, my daughter's in high school, and that's what the guys all wear in the high schools now. These jogger pants and sliders. I digress.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. So I mean, that was definitely this guy, and and had an attitude to boot. And I'm thinking, oh boy, this guy's going to have a tough time getting through our program. And I'm not sure if this is somebody that we want working for us. This young man made this just transformation. I mean, 180 degrees. And I'm super proud to say that he became a flight instructor, has built all his time, is off to an airline, great career. So it's nice to see turning around, some of these young men and these young women that, you know, I didn't think was going to be successful. It was really a pivotal moment in my career to remind myself, like, don't give up on somebody just because
Yeah.
they're a knucklehead now, because maybe we can make them not be a knucklehead.
Yeah. Weren't we all knuckleheads at about that age, though?
I think there's different levels of knucklehead.
Yes, I would 100% agree with that. So that leads me kind of into the question of what do you see it taking for them to be successful? I mean, you kind of mentioned having the right attitude. Are there other skill sets or things that they can develop either in training or before training that makes one person more successful versus another?
I think one of the most key factors to success in our program is somebody that's going to spend a lot of time, on property, somebody that is really involved themselves in the culture, where they're being supported by others and they're supporting others, developing good study skills. Those people that go to class, go home, disappear, they show up for their flight, they go right home,
Yeah.
generally are not as successful. You kind of have to drink the Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
And our Kool-Aid's great, but it's that's one of the things that really makes people successful is being on property and surrounding themselves in the community.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate at Thrust Flight to have a lot of current and retired airline pilots and some executives and some really talented, well-connected people at the school that help these folks get jobs, that write them letters of recommendation, that mentor them. They don't do it on their own, basically leveraging the community that we've created. So I think those are the things that are going to make people successful.
And you talked about mentoring and being part of a community. I think that is so important because I mean, really, every one of us who's in aviation and flying, I mean, we've all been in that position, or we've all had that one maneuver that you just struggle with a little bit in flight training that you can relate to, or maybe offer that guidance of, here's how I got my steep turns in order. I think that's really, really special to have something like that and I think that people need to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at Thrust Flight, we've done something really neat. We've created a new learning management system
Okay.
within our organization, when we talk about maneuvers, right, and getting those steep turns down. So one thing that we've done at Thrust Flight is we've created this learning management system that incorporates a ground portion with things like maneuvers guides and
Mm-hmm.
educational content, and then a quiz associated with that. And then we've also taken and we've videoed every single flight within the syllabus. So
Oh,
if
nice.
there's 40 lessons, for example, within the private pilot program, there is 40 videos in that course. So what you're going to do is you're going to watch that video before you go out and do that next flight. And I always say that the cockpit is a terrible classroom. It's very hard to learn when you're manipulating the controls, when you're looking for traffic, you're talking in the radio. There's a lot of external things that demand your
Yeah.
attention. So I think it's really neat. And we've certainly seen a real acceleration in people's education because they're able to watch everything they're about to do before they go out and do it. And they're seeing it twice. Now, we still
Yeah,
have
I suppose.
in-person ground school, so we still have that community, but we are literally steeping people in this as much as we possibly can. And then the neat part, and this is kind of more how the sausage is made, but we talked about accountability and we talked about study skills and things like that. This is so much easier than it was in my day. I'm not, people don't have to sit there and copy the text out of the book to get it to stick in their brain, right? It's very interactive. And we're able to look at each individual student and we're able to look at, how much of the video did they watch? How did they do on their quizzes? How engaged were they with the ground portion? So when the instructor says, "Hey, I don't think my student is studying enough. I don't think he's putting the work in," but traditionally we would send them with the student advisor, and she would sit down with him or her and say, "Look, you're not studying enough." Most of the time, the answer is, "Oh, I'm studying all the time." Now we're able to go and look at this data and say, "Well,
Yeah.
no, you're
Want to
not."
bet?
So it's just another tool for us to hopefully help coach people, really getting that work done. And let's face it, we all work harder when we know somebody else is watching. And And I think that's part of how we're able to really create as good of pilots as we are in the short period of time that we can do it in.
Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier about the aircraft maintenance part of things. And
Mhm.
I think you're absolutely right. There is not enough conversation happening in reference to the shortage of mechanics that's out there. So tell me a bit about, I mean, you are an A&P yourself. How did you go down this road of expanding your program then to incorporate aircraft maintenance?
We had a very big problem back in 2015, 2016, 2017, finding flight instructors, especially competent flight instructors. So we were hiring flight instructors from, ATP or American Flyers or these other flight schools. So we would pull these folks in from these other flight schools, and we were getting very inconsistent instructional styles. And if a student had to switch instructor, a lot of times we'd have an instructor say, "Well, I don't like the way you're doing this, right? So I'm going to unteach you this and reteach it the way that I like to teach it." So what we did is we created this CFI Academy, and we literally had people come from all over the world to come to our CFI Academy when we were offering this because we had such exceptional results. So we created that CFI Academy to fix an internal problem. The internal problem being that we weren't happy with the consistency of the flight instruction being given
Okay.
to our students. We did the same thing with the mechanic program. So it was really designed to solve an internal problem. We don't have enough mechanics, and the mechanics that we're getting, we don't like them. Right? We don't like the way they're maintaining aircraft. There's different standards. There's different expectations. There was just a lot of different flavors of the maintenance. And so what we decided to do, because it was so successful on the CFI side, is we decided to create this A&P program. So, we're training these folks with the hope that they'd like to work with us, at least for some time. And we're going to teach them the way that we want to maintain an aircraft. You know as well as I do that flight school maintenance a lot of times is inadequate, at least in my experience. And we want people that come to Thrust to have a first class experience, and not just in the education, but in the aircraft that they're flying, which is why we only fly
Sure.
new aircraft, air conditioned aircraft, and aircraft that are maintained really, really well. But the aircraft can only be maintained as well as the mechanic can maintain it.
Right.
So that's really fundamentally why we originally did this. And then, we said, well, at the same time, there's this huge shortage of aircraft mechanics, and we created this 10-month program, which again is one of the shortest A&P programs in the country right now. Now, it is a full-time job. It's not a part-time situation like, your local community college,
Sure.
where you're going to spend, 24 months or sometimes longer to get through that program.
Uh-huh.
So it is a very intense program. It's one that you're out working on aircraft every single day, but you're learning all the best practices that we've learned over the years in order to really become a fantastic A&P. And it's a great thing for us internally because we're able to watch people from the day they start, right? So we're able to pick the best people that come out of our program and put them to work. So it's just this self-generating organism that really has been a very neat thing for us and has solved a lot of the hiring challenges that I think a lot of other organizations have, and a lot of the quality and consistency issues that they have as well.
Sure. And are you having success with that program, like bringing in new fresh blood, so to speak, to want to get into that line of work?
So much so that we're on a wait list right now.
Really?
We
That's
are.
good.
So it's really fantastic. We are out of room at the Addison location. We've opened a location at our Conroe location in North Houston a couple months ago. So that program is building. We also recently opened a new flight school in Arizona at Falcon Field. We'll be launching the A&P program as soon as we get done with a big remodel project that we're doing out there.
Nice.
And then we plan to expand into the Northeast, into Florida. I think to scale this is a really easy thing to do because the need is there. People want to get into the industry. I think the biggest challenge is just the financing that goes along with,
Oh, sure.
paying for the program. So that's the biggest challenge there. But we've started a scholarship for folks that really want to do this and couldn't do it otherwise. So really excited about that, and hopefully can get a lot more people in the industry that would have never otherwise been able to afford it.
Sure. So if you have someone who's maybe on the fence of not knowing if aircraft maintenance might be the route, like what would you be able to tell them about not just the sustainability of that role, but the importance of it and what that career path could look like for someone?
I've been in this a long time, and I've seen mechanics go from making $10 an hour to, I think everybody that works for me makes six figures a year now as
Nice.
aircraft mechanics. So certainly the pay has gone up exponentially, and that's a direct correlation to the number of mechanics that are out there. There simply aren't enough, so everybody's stealing from everybody else and throwing more money at people. So I think as far as sustainability goes, um, it's it's infinitely sustainable. I don't think you're going to see a lot of the turbulence in the maintenance side that I think traditionally we've seen on the pilot side, because airplanes are always going to need to be
Sure.
maintained. And I think there's a stigma that goes along with being a mechanic that I think turns a lot of people off, which is really a shame. I think a lot of people hear mechanic and they think, oh, grease monkey, somebody rolling around in
Yeah.
oil or hydraulic fluid, the guy in the coveralls. It's everywhere else in the world, they call an aircraft mechanic an engineer, right? Not a mechanic. And I think it's really a more appropriate title for these folks in the industry, because they're working on sophisticated aircraft,
Sure.
40-50 million dollar more
Hmm.
equipment. They're using a lot of diagnostic tools, a lot of computers. So there's a lot of technology that goes into it. There's a lot of creativity that goes into maintaining aircraft, in diagnosing issues and problems and things like that. So I would say that aircraft mechanic really needs to be rebranded and remarketed to this new generation, because I don't think it's what people. I think the reality is different than what people think it really is.
Sure. Now, you mentioned that you're a DPE, so I'm sure that you appreciate scenario-based training, right? So I'm going to ask you a scenario-based question.
I hope I pass.
We're going to find out. So I bring you a very specific example that someone recently brought to me. I'm like, I'm not really quite sure how to answer that, but I bet I can find someone who might know the answer, which is the joy of some of these podcasts that I do. So, say, for example, you have a student who has enrolled in one of these four-year degree programs. They are a year and some change into it, and they're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And this is not the direction that I want to go. This is going to take too long. I don't like the academics, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of advice would you give that kind of person as far as where can they go next? Are they going to be successful in a program like yours? Should they look for a different type of flight school that's going to allow some flexibility? What would be your thoughts on that?
I think it really just depends on the individual. A lot of people are in different seasons of their life. Do you have a family? Do you have a wife? Do you have young children? I think it really just depends on how much time you can dedicate to doing a program like ours, or going the route of a more traditional Part 61. I think one of the challenges with the 61 school is there's not really any motivation for that 61 school necessarily to get them out of the program. There really is an
Sure.
incentive a lot of times to keep them flying, right? So, I would want to partner with somebody, whether that's a 61 or a 141 situation, depending on what the goals of the individual are, with some real clear expectations, right? And then some real deliverables along with that. So I hate to dance around answering your question, but I think I would have to meet this individual and ask some really pointed questions and say, what can you dedicate to, right? Like what can you commit to, rather? And how dedicated do you want to be in this program, and what are your goals? And I think it really has to circle around that, because a program like ours is not for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not. But having been in a 61 situation myself, and you have to be a very motivated individual a lot of times to get through those programs, because you don't have those other folks to lean on. And I mean, let's face it, a lot of flight schools, Part 61 smaller flight schools, they might do a lot of private pilot training, right? But how many CFIs do they make a year?
Right.
How many instrument pilots are they making, a year? And how confident are you in the equipment that you're potentially taking into inclement weather, clouds, things like that? How confident are you that that's a safe airplane to be in that sort of situation? And I certainly don't want to talk bad about other flight schools. There are very great Part 61 schools out there, and they're very safe older aircraft that are out there, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily the rule. I mean, a lot of times the exception.
Sure. Fair points. If you had to give some advice to someone who's looking to pursue a career in aviation, what would that be? Your best piece of advice.
If you truly want to do this, if you truly want a career in aviation, you've got to be all in. You cannot do this casually. You have 100% to making this happen, right? Knowing that you're going to have good days, knowing that you're going to have bad days. And look, the measure of the man or the woman is not if they get knocked down. It's if they get back up and how they get back up, right? How do they double down when things aren't going their way? What do they do in the face of adversity? Getting your head wrapped around that and having a good attitude on one of your worst days about the situation is what's going to make you successful in this. And go into it with that attitude, go into it with resolve and determination. This is a career, unlike so many other careers, in my opinion, that elicits a lot of passion. And be passionate about it. I mean, fall in love with aviation because, again, that's what makes our community so special, and share that with other people. It's unlike anything else.
There's so many valid points there as far as the passion that's involved. You have to be all in. And I think that was a great answer. So you have passed that part of the interview.
All right, good. I get to move on to the flight portion.
Yes, you do. Congratulations. Well, Patrick, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking some time sitting down with me and talking about not just your program, but just these accelerator programs in general and just the industry that we're sitting in today. So thank you so much for joining me.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
I want to offer a big thank you once again to Patrick for joining me on this episode of the podcast. We had a great conversation after we stopped recording too, and you may hear from him again in the future. He's got a lot of things that he can bring to the table and talk about. So I'm excited to see what those conversations might bring. So out of this episode, there's a couple of key takeaways that I want to talk about here. And some of these were my own kind of preconceived notions about these accelerated flight programs, where he mentions the term pilot factories, where they're just pumping out pilots. And with that, what does the quality control of that look like? But with his program specifically, he talks about how there is this quality control and they're really proud of the product that they put out there. And it's not just try to rush you through the program. Good luck. See you bye. They want to produce professional pilots. The other thing that he talks about is community. And I think that it is so important within aviation to be able to lean on your community, lean into your people, and have a good mentor network that you can chat with when you are struggling with some of those maneuvers or certain parts of your flight training. Because it may not necessarily click with your instructor, but if you can touch base with that mentor or someone within your community to go, hey, I'm struggling with this. What do you think? And be able to talk through some of those things can be really, really impactful. So awesome points there. And I was also really excited to talk about the A&P shortages that we're having right now. I really, really think this is not talked about enough in the industry today. And I do plan on doing some more podcasts on A&P work specifically and how someone can go further within that profession, because there's just not enough people getting into that side of aviation right now. Because not unlike the situation we have with pilots, we are going to start having a situation where we have all these A&Ps retiring and no one to backfill those positions. So what they're doing, I think, is really important. Having an accelerated A&P program, kind of building it out across the country, and having a wait list is awesome for them. But we need to get more of those people out into the field working on aircraft, because let's face it, some of these aircraft, they're not getting any younger, and the need to have them maintained is really, really important. So kudos to those guys for putting that kind of program together, and I'm really curious to see where that takes them. Alrighty, you know what to do. If you are enjoying this podcast, please like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening to this. It really does help out. And those reviews or reaching out really do mean a lot to me. It helps to fuel my passion to keep producing this type of content and sharing it with all of you. So if you want to reach out, you have an idea for a future episode, or you want to be a guest, you can reach out to me on any of my social medias at aero_exploration, or my email address is jim@flyingmidwest. Both of those will be down on the show notes. So if you can't remember, or you don't have a pencil while you're driving and listening to this, scroll down to the show notes when you get stopped in a safe place, no texting and driving, and jot that stuff down so you can contact me or leave a review. That was a lot of words to say. Please help support the podcast by leaving a rating and review. All right, that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and exploring some aviation with me. Until next time, this is AeroExploration signing off.